CBS Sports HQ Spotlight is live. I'm Chris Hassel with Amanda Guerra.
Howdy.
Amanda, I am on cloud 17 right now. You want to know why?
Normally it's cloud 9, so yeah, why 17?
17 because we have 17 college football games tonight to kick off week 1.
That is absolutely crazy. Okay, some of them I was looking into them. Some that I'm excited about, number 25 Boise State taking on South Florida. Also Nebraska taking on the Cincinnati Bearcats.
Yeah, that's at Arrowhead Stadium.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. Like, a lot of our experts think Nebraska could be a dark horse.
Yeah.
But then also, are the Swifties going to get in on this? If they're true Swifties, they should be cheering for
Travis
Cincinnati.
Kelce is a Cincinnati alum.
Both of them.
Well, yeah, but the other one isn't playing in the game.
Yeah, but they just like the whole Kelce family. Anyway, okay, we're not going to start with that, though. We actually are going to start in the NFL because 1 week from tonight, the Cowboys at the Link to take on the Philadelphia Eagles, the reigning Super Bowl champs. But, of course, the big question, is that guy right there, Micah Parsons, going to be playing? This was him during the last preseason game. He went viral. And to be honest, if I didn't want to be somewhere, I would also be eating nachos and taking a nap. He was spotted. Here's the interesting part. Yesterday at DFW Airport, a good friend of mine, Jane Slater, works for NFL Network, saying he's going to get a second opinion on his back tightness to try to kind of work out that issue with the Cowboys. Here's more from their head coach, Brian Schottenheimer.
The fact he's been here gives him a little bit of a leg up on the fact that he knows the defense, and that could be a completely different story if he wasn't here. But at the end of the day, I think once we want him out there as soon as possible. And you know, when he's feeling up to it and all those things is a big factor into it. But every day that he can get out there and get reps would be great. But I do think very strongly that him being around has helped. Him doing some of the walkthroughs and things like that does help. There's communication. There's signals that come from the sideline. There's communication from player to player that he's getting all those things. But the best way to get good at football is to play football. And so I would say as soon as possible would be the desired effect.
Okay, so we're not just going to talk about the Cowboys here. We're going to go through the entire NFC East. Biggest questions you guys have going into week 1. Mike Renner, John Breech, thank you so much for joining us. I apologize for these sleeves. They're the dumbest things I've ever seen. Let's start with the Cowboys. Both of you have the same question. Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's when's Micah Parsons going to play? Is it going to be week 1? Is he going to get traded? I know when the Raiders traded Khalil Mack on the eve of the season, they ended up going 4-12 that year. It's not good to trade away your best player right before the start of the season. It's a little bit demoralizing. So I don't foresee that happening, but obviously crazier things have happened in the NFL. But if this drags into the regular season, that's just as demoralizing. Looking over there to the stands and seeing your best player, not in uniform is tough as a team that has, high aspirations this season. So it really just comes down to when they can get this saga over with, because if it looms into the regular season, I think you could pretty much write this Cowboy season off. It ain't going to end with a Lombardi trophy.
Amanda, I'm glad you mentioned your sleeves because my question was going to be, what's up with Amanda's sleeves? So now I can get back to business and ask about Micah Parsons like Mike just did. When you look at this Cowboys schedule, we're talking about week 1 is next Thursday. That is 7 days away. Micah Parsons is not even at the Cowboys facility. He's on an airplane flying places. So when your star defensive player is not even in the same city as your team 7 days before the start of the season, that does not bode well for his chances of being on the field in week 1, even if the two sides get a deal done. And the thing is here, we've seen some ugly and bitter negotiations between Jerry Jones and some Cowboys players in the past. Dak Prescott's negotiation went right up to game day last year in week 1. CeeDee Lamb's contract came late in the game last August. But this one just feels a little bit different because there's so much animosity. It's just like this giant game of chicken, and Jerry Jones isn't going to blink. Micah Parsons isn't going to blink. And you have Brian Schottenheimer here now kind of siding with Jerry Jones saying, hey, Micah needs to get out here. Well, that's not going to sound too good to Micah Parsons, who just wants a new contract. So as Mike said, if they don't get Parsons out on the field, this season could go nowhere quickly. And it doesn't feel like they're going to get Parsons out in the field, at least for week 1.
Yeah, it really is not looking like that right now. Of course, anything could happen. So the Cowboys taking on the Eagles. 1 week from today, on Thursday, by the way, the Eagles favored by 6.5 points in that game. Not a lot of roster changes for the Eagles this offseason. Mike, what's your biggest question for them?
My question comes at the coaching change. It's the offense coordinator, Kevin Patullo. What's his offense going to look like, and what's he going to look like as a play caller and game planner? Because, you could have the same playbook from last year. You can have the same playbook as Shane Steichen had. You can have the same plays. It's how do you implement them? How do you go week to week to face off against the defense you're facing that's different? And we saw that just 2 years ago when Brian Johnson took over, because they've had 4 different OCs in 4 years. And Brian Johnson took over for Shane Steichen. The results were not good. He got fired after 1 year because that offense did not play up to the talent that it has. We obviously saw a bounce back last year with Kellen Moore, but Kevin Patullo was the passing game coordinator those last 4 years. It's not really as if their passing game is what you hang your hat on here in Philadelphia. So very interested to see just what it looks like in Philly this season.
And for me, my biggest question with the Eagles is how are they going to play this season with a target on their back? When you are the reigning Super Bowl champs, you get everyone's best shot. And that's a big reason why we've only seen one team repeat over the past 22 years, and that was the Chiefs. And it took having Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback. And so when you're taking everyone's best shot, that kind of wears on you. And when you look at what the Eagles are up against in terms of their schedule, well, week 1 might look like a layup because Micah Parsons isn't going to be out there, but guess who is playing? Dak Prescott. Prescott is 4-1 in his past 5 starts against the Eagles. And then once you get through there, you're playing 4 straight games against teams that made the playoffs last season, including a Chiefs team that's going to be out for revenge after that Super Bowl loss. So this is a very brutal schedule, and every team is likely going to be playing you tough. As Mike just mentioned, you're also trying to replace some coordinators. So this certainly is not going to be an easy repeat for the Eagles, and they might not even repeat as NFC East champs. We haven't seen anyone repeat as division champs since 2004.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot to at the top of this segment here. So let's go to the Commanders, the team, just to make this division even more interesting, that met the Eagles in the NFC title game last year. Look, Jaden Daniels put this team on his back. He got him to that point, and it seems like both of you want to make sure that's not necessarily the case this season. Mike, we'll start with you. Your biggest question for the Commanders.
Yeah, it's obviously on the defensive side of the ball, specifically their run defense. Have they done enough to improve it? Because when I look on paper, the additions they've made to that front 7, guys like Javon Kinlaw, guys like Von Miller, guys like Dietrich Wise, Eddie Goldman, they're not exactly plus run defenders. Javon Kinlaw is a pass rusher first. They are not coming in to shore up what this team does or what this team was deficient at against the run last season. And they were the only team of the bottom 12 rushing defenses in the NFL to make the playoffs. It's difficult to win games when you have that bad of a run defense, and that's why they squeaked by so many. But it ultimately was their downfall in the playoffs. They can't make it through teams like the Lions and the Eagles and the Packers, who all run the ball really well in the NFC, Bucs as well. The fact that, with that bad of a run defense, I just don't see that being able to run through that sort of gauntlet. So if it hasn't improved, I think they might still be, bridesmaids in the NFC East.
Yeah, it feels like the Commanders got overlooked a little bit last season because the Bengals existed as a team with a bad defense and a great offense, but the Commanders did have an equally big problem. When Mike says their run defense was bad, they gave up the 3rd most rushing yards in the league last year. And so if they don't fix that, it's going to be tough to be competitive and tough to get back to the playoffs because they're going to play teams that bully you. They have games against the Chargers, the Broncos, the Chiefs, Josh Jacobs, and the Packers. So there are a lot of tough games against a lot of tough running backs. And if they have not fixed that rushing defense, it might not matter how well Jaden Daniels and the offense playing because you can't outscore every team every single week. So if it's not fixed, this team could take a step back this year.
Let's finally go to the Giants here. Look, we know the defense right now is the heart of this team, specifically that very formidable D-line. And, Mike, it seems like that's where you're beginning for the Giants.
Yeah, it's can this defense and that defensive line specifically do enough to carry them to save the jobs of their head coach and GM? Because I think we look at this offense and we see a cap. This isn't one of I feel like there's a lot of teams this year where like, hey, if everything kind of goes right, this could be a top 10 offense in the NFL. No one's saying that about the New York Giants. There's no top 10 offense walking through that door when you have Russell Wilson at this point in his career as your starting quarterback. So the offense, we know what it's going to be, and it's not going to be great. But this defense, it could be a top 5 defense in the league. They could win games just on the backs of this unit with all that they've added to it, specifically along that defensive line. So I just want to see when you get Abdul Carter and Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns and all those guys out there, how dominant is that unit, and can it just take over games and go win it all on their own?
Mike, you are clearly sleeping on Russell Wilson. What do you mean he can't lead a top 10 offense? No, kind of agree with you here. My biggest question is, how long is Russell Wilson going to last as the starting quarterback in New York? And I think this is a fascinating dynamic no matter which way it goes, because if he lasts long, that's extremely impressive, because the Giants have one of the most difficult schedules in the NFL. When you look at their first half of the season, 6 of their first 8 games are against teams that made the playoffs last year. That's games against the Chiefs, the Chargers. They play the Eagles twice in those first 6-8 weeks. So if Russell Wilson still is holding on to the job by week 8, that means the Giants are probably playing at least okay, 3 or 4 wins, and that would be impressive for him. And then the flip side is the wheels fall off the wagon. The Giants win 0 or 1 of their first 8 games. They bench Russell Wilson, and then we get to see Jackson Dart before we get to November. So I think either way this goes, it will be fascinating to watch in New York.
Guys, we appreciate it. A lot more to talk to you about during the show, so hang on just a second. Going over there, the biggest questions for the NFC East, taking a look at the NFC East Week 1 games. Look, we care about the Giants and the Commanders. We really do. Everyone is going to be watching Cowboys at the Eagles. Birds, Super Bowl champs, favored by 6.5. Oh my God, I almost said first kick. And then I almost said first pitch because it's been so long since we've talked about football. Kickoff set for 8:20 Eastern.
And kickoffs should be more interesting this year. We should get more returns because of the
There you go.
So there you go.